Okay, imagine this. You've got a chemical, right? And health authorities are super strict about it. Like, if even a tiny bit extra shows up in a baby's IV nutrition bag, alarms go off, flags are raised, poisoning risk. But then, that exact same chemical, it gets the green light to be injected, reputedly, in way, way bigger amounts, into the same kid over their first few years. And guess what? No warning labels needed, no safety limits set. Strange, huh?
That exact contradiction is really where we're focusing today. It's bizarre. We're diving into that really intense, very polarized discussion around autism, but we're looking beyond the usual talk about genes and, general environment. We're zooming in on one specific additive, aluminum.
All right, okay, let's unpack this, because we need to be upfront. The official medical consensus is crystal clear. Vaccines do not cause autism, period. We accept that as the starting point. But our mission here is to look at the points being raised by people questioning that system. We want to neutrally present the data they point to. What happens when you really look closely at the ingredients, or the timing with rising diagnoses, or even how some of those safety studies were done?
Exactly. And we have to acknowledge up front the established view. The link is officially called a myth. You have strong proponents of this view, people like Dr. Paul Offit, who've been very clear. The science is settled, and historically, someone like Anthony Fauci also publicly held that line, during his time in public health.
Yeah. And speaking of figures like Fauci, there was an interesting bit of data that came up in the material we reviewed. Just for context, nothing more. Apparently, between 2010 and 2021, he received something like 58 royalty payments connected to vaccine research. Now, we're not saying anything about that, just laying it out there. It adds a layer of financial context to the whole picture, doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, putting that aside for a moment, let's get back to the physiological arguments that challenge the consensus. It often starts with looking at the brain chemistry itself. Research shows pretty consistently that people diagnosed with autism often have this significant chronic inflammation in the brain. And the key thing is, this isn't like the inflammation you get from a cold or flu bug. It's persistent. It's not triggered by a normal microbe.
Okay, so it's like a constant low-grade fire in the brain, not a temporary response to being sick. What about the rest of the body?
Well, the immune system seems to be involved too. It often appears sort of hyperreactive. There was one big study that critics often point to, and it found something quite striking. 70% of kids with autism showed higher levels of autoimmune diseases compared to the general kid population, which really suggests there might be some kind of systemic immune issue playing a role.
And that connects directly back to vaccines, because they're designed to trigger the immune system and ingredients.
Precisely. A vaccine needs something extra to really kick the immune system into high gear to make sure you get strong immunity. That something extra is called an adjuvant. And the most common one used today, by far, aluminum compounds. Now, the research we looked at describes aluminum pretty starkly. It's classified as a known neurotoxin, and it specifically seems to cause problems in the brain areas that handle really crucial stuff: learning, memory, concentration, even speech.
Okay, wait. If it's a neurotoxin and the brain has that blood-brain barrier for protection, how does it get in? It doesn't just, slip past security, does it?
Well, it's a bit more complex. It's almost like it gets an escort. See, when aluminum is injected as part of a vaccine, immune cells, macrophages, gobble up these tiny aluminum particles right there at the injection site. These particles are really small, and they stick around. They're persistent. So as these immune cells travel around the body, doing their job, patrolling, sometimes they cross that blood-brain barrier and they carry the aluminum, that neurotoxin, right into the brain with them. Because it's happening repeatedly with multiple shots, it builds up, it accumulates. It's not easily filtered out.
Wow. Okay. That's a much clearer picture than just slipping past. It's being carried in. So let's connect that mechanism to the historical numbers, because that correlation is really the core of the critics' argument, isn't it? That big shift over the last few decades.
Right. Let's set a baseline. Think back to 1980. Back then, the autism rate was reported at roughly 1 in 10,000 kids. And the typical vaccine schedule, the aggressive one for a child up to age 6, involved about 12 doses total. The estimated aluminum exposure from those 12 doses was around 1,000 micrograms, or mcg. That was the picture then.
1 in 10,000 kids, 12 doses, 1,000 micrograms of aluminum. Got it. And fast forward to now, very recently.
By 2023, the autism rate had exploded. It was reported at 1 in 36 kids. And that aggressive vaccine schedule, it now included 49 doses by age 6, which corresponds to an estimated aluminum exposure of around 5,000 micrograms.
Hold on. So the doses more than quadrupled, 4 times as many shots, and the aluminum exposure went up 5 times. from 1,000 to 5,000 milligrams, and during that exact same period, the autism rate went from 1 in 10,000 to 1 in 36. That tracks almost perfectly.
That direct parallel climb is the central piece of evidence that critics say just cannot be dismissed. It's a stark correlation, and it brings us right back to that regulatory puzzle we started with.
The IV bag versus the injection needle.
Exactly. The FDA, part of Health and Human Services, has rules. Strict warning labels, limits on how much aluminum can be in things like intravenous feeding solutions for babies because of the known dangers. Yet somehow there are no safety limits set, no warnings required for that 5,000 milligram dose delivered through the modern vaccine schedule to a child under 6. Critics argue this isn't just a small inconsistency. They see it as a major breakdown in applying basic safety science to injections.
It feels like, given that the FDA itself knows aluminum is a neurotoxin, that lack of a safety limit for injection seems like a huge gap, like the perfect place for this whole controversy to fester.
It leads right into the main hypothesis from those questioning the consensus. They call it the perfect storm theory. The idea is basically that some kids might already have certain genes that make them a bit more vulnerable. Maybe they don't detoxify things well, or perhaps they're prone to inflammation. Then you take that underlying vulnerability and you combine it with this really aggressive vaccine schedule, pumping in those large amounts of aluminum adjuvant. And you overwhelm the child's system.
So it's not saying aluminum alone causes it, but maybe for certain kids, it's like throwing gasoline on a tiny pre-existing spark. It's the trigger that pushes them over the edge.
That's the idea. The aluminum acts as the potent trigger for the underlying vulnerability to manifest as the full condition. And this is why some of those critics are suggesting things like maybe mandatory genetic screening before vaccination, so parents and doctors could actually make a decision based on that child's specific risk factors for handling aluminum.
Okay, now let's dig into the research itself, because a big part of the critique focuses on the studies that supposedly disprove any link. This is where it gets really interesting, maybe even a bit sneaky.
Yeah, fascinating is one word for it. The critique centers on a fundamental flaw in how many key studies were designed. See, in good science, if you want to test if ingredient X, say the aluminum adjuvant, is safe, you need two groups. One gets X. The other group, the control group, needs to get a true placebo, like a saltwater injection, something totally inert, nothing.
Right, so you have a clean comparison, a baseline.
Exactly. But what happened in a lot of these major vaccine trials, the ones used to say no link, the so-called control group didn't get a true placebo. They often got either a placebo that still contained aluminum.
Wait, what?
Yeah. Or they got a different vaccine that also contained aluminum.
So you're comparing aluminum vaccine A to aluminum vaccine B or to an aluminum placebo.
Pretty much. It's like testing if sugar makes kids hyper by giving the control group high fructose corn syrup.
You haven't tested the effect of the aluminum itself at all. You've just shown the new aluminum thing isn't worse than the old aluminum thing.
Precisely. If both groups show similar neurological outcomes, you haven't proven aluminum safe. You've potentially just masked its effect because both groups were exposed. Critics argue this fundamentally undermines the claim that the link has been scientifically disproven. The variable being tested was present on both sides.
That just seems, wow. Okay, so if the official studies have that flaw, where else do critics look for evidence?
Well, they look at situations where that main variable, the aggressive aluminum-heavy vaccine schedule, is different or absent. This often leads to comparisons with communities or populations with very different vaccination practices.
Which brings us to the example people often mention, the Amish community.
Indeed. Researchers point out that the Amish tend to live more traditional lives and, importantly, have significantly lower vaccination rates compared to the general U.S. population. Critics highlight that reports consistently show extremely low rates of autism diagnoses within these largely unvaccinated communities. They see this as real-world evidence suggesting that the modern high-aluminum schedule is a key factor contributing to the rise elsewhere.
Okay, so if the theory holds that aluminum toxicity leading to brain inflammation and immune issues is a core mechanism, what does the alternative approach to treatment look like? You mentioned Dr. Cornbury's protocol.
Yes, if you accept the premise of aluminum toxicity, the focus shifts to detoxification and calming the system down. Dr. Cornbury's approach is quite specific. It starts with trying to regulate that overactive immune system. He uses high doses of vitamin D3. We're talking like 10,000 IUs daily to help calm things down, especially the inflammation in the brain. Then there's propolis. That's a resin made by bees. It's used as a potent anti-inflammatory, again, particularly targeting the brain, trying to put out that chronic fire we talked about. And it also helps modulate the immune response.
Okay, so vitamin D and propolis help calm the inflammation and the immune system. But how do you actually get the aluminum out, since it's so persistent?
That's the absolute key step in this protocol. The main detoxification agent is a specific form of oral silica. It's called monomethylsilanitrol. It's given usually 3 times a day, around 100 to 200 milligrams per dose. The reason silica is used is because chemically it binds very strongly to aluminum particles. It grabs onto them. Once the silica and aluminum are bound together, the resulting molecule is apparently too large to be reabsorbed by the body. So both the silica and the aluminum it captured get flushed out through the kidneys. It's essentially escorted out of the body. He also often adds other supports, things like glycinate, maybe 4 grams, which can help with hyperactivity and calming the nervous system, and sometimes advises a low-carb diet, the idea being to increase ketones, which some believe are a cleaner fuel source for the brain compared to glucose.
And the need for this kind of active removal, this detoxification, is supported by evidence showing the aluminum does stick around, right? It doesn't just leave on its own.
Absolutely not, according to the critics. If it's not actively removed, it can stay in the body for a very long time, and it preferentially accumulates in certain tissues, including the brain. The direct proof they point to comes from research done at places like the University of Oxford. Studies there actually analyzed brain tissue from deceased individuals who had been diagnosed with autism, and they found significantly high levels of aluminum nanoparticles embedded right there in the brain tissue. So it wasn't just theory, they could visually see the neurotoxin buildup.
That's pretty compelling physical evidence. And Dr. Cornbray apparently shared a specific case study that really highlights how this detox approach might work in practice.
Yes, it was quite a striking example. He described working with a 17-year-old girl. She was born in 2006, so right in that period of the very high-dose schedule. She had apparently suffered from severe depression since she was just 4 years old, and had been on antidepressants for most of her young life. So she underwent this silica-based protocol, the whole approach aimed at binding and removing stored aluminum. She came back a year later, and the reported improvement was huge, something like an 85% reduction in her depressive symptoms. It was so significant that her psychiatrist actually started reducing her antidepressant medication because she was simply doing so much better.
Wow. And didn't this speaker connect this to maybe wider trends, like not just autism diagnoses?
Yes, he made an interesting observation. He noted that the timelines for the steep rise in adolescent depression and, tragically, suicide rates seem to run almost parallel to the rise in autism diagnoses over the past few decades. It raises this really uncomfortable question. Could there be a shared environmental factor, like maybe this widespread aluminum exposure, impacting overall neurological health and resilience in kids born during this era?
Could the issue be even broader than just the autism spectrum, potentially affecting general mental well-being for a whole generation?
That's the implication, yeah. It suggests the potential scope might extend beyond just one specific diagnosis, possibly contributing to a general increase in neurological and mental health challenges we're seeing in young people who grew up with these aggressive vaccine schedules.
Okay, so where does this leave us? Where does this leave you, the listener? It's complicated, right? On one side, you have the very firm, established medical consensus. No link. Full stop. But that consensus rests, in part, on studies that critics argue have a fundamental flaw and no true aluminum-free control group. On the other side, you have this undeniable historical correlation. Aluminum exposure skyrockets, autism diagnoses skyrocket. You have biological evidence of aluminum in the brains of affected individuals. And you have these detox protocols that seem to show results for some.
It's a tough spot. Whether you lean towards the consensus view or find the counter-arguments compelling, the data presented forces us to confront something critical. Aluminum is a known neurotoxin. It is being introduced into babies and young children in increasingly large amounts via injection. And the research definitively proving its long-term safety at these levels using truly inert placebos. Well, critics argue that research is either missing or, worse, seriously flawed by design.
So I have to end by asking this. If we have strict safety rules for aluminum going into a baby through an IV drip because we know it's potentially harmful, why is it okay to have basically no upper safety limit, no warnings, when that same neurotoxin is being repeatedly injected in a way that allows it to cross the blood-brain barrier? Maybe the biggest controversy here isn't even the link itself. Maybe it's the fact that we seem to lack the kind of unbiased aluminum-free long-term safety studies that sound scientific method would demand. That's something to think about.